Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over next, final prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Las Vegas Raiders. And this is a team that was 7-9 last season, ended up having a bit of a down season overall. How will this team do in 2020, and how is the first season in Las Vegas going to go for the Raiders in 2020 is what we're going over here today. And we're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full prediction and preview on every game on the Raiders schedule going into the 2020 season. So that being said, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for the Raiders. Of course, they were 7-9 overall once again. They were 3-4 between September and October, then 4-5 between November and the postseason. So obviously, this was a team that was pretty inconsistent last season. I mean, they had a couple of good wins, and of course, they beat off the Colts on the road, 31-24. Also had a couple of good wins against the Chargers, 26-24, 24-17 as well. And they also beat off the Bears, 24-21. So obviously, they did get a couple of good wins as they went through last season, but obviously they still took a few really bad losses too, and that was something that definitely impacted the Raiders in the end. And of course, they did miss the playoffs just by a couple of games though. I mean, of course, the Raiders last season didn't really have much of a chance of winning their division. I mean, you had the Chiefs in there, and the Chiefs were Super Bowl champions. They were just too good for that division last season, obviously. But for the Raiders, I mean, yeah, this is a team that was good at some points last season, but in the end, I mean, it just was not good enough for them to make it back to the playoffs. But as far as the returning production looks, of course, they returned their starting quarterback in Derek Carr, and that is going to be a big return for this team. Obviously, Derek Carr, I mean, he's been a pretty inconsistent quarterback. That's kind of been something that's really been detrimental to him over the past few years. And I mean, he did put up 4,000 yards last season, 21 touchdowns and 8 interceptions as well. He also had a 70.4% completion rate, so he did have a very good completion rate last season, which honestly, I mean, that was very impressive in comparison to most quarterbacks. I mean, considering the level that Derek Carr is at, considering he's probably close to a mid-tier quarterback in the NFL, I mean, a 70% completion rate really is not all that bad at all. I mean, he also was able to put up over 4,000 yards. Really is not all that bad for a quarterback like Derek Carr. However, this team is going to have some quarterback competition next season as they bring in quarterback Marcus Mariota out of Tennessee. So now you got two good quarterbacks in there trying to get that QB1 spot. And obviously, Derek Carr, I would say, is my early favorite to probably win that starting position. And I do expect him to stay as the top quarterback for Las Vegas going into next season. But obviously, Marcus Mariota will make that situation a bit more complicated. Obviously, I mean, you're going to see both quarterbacks get some action at some point this upcoming season. It's just a matter of who's going to be the starting quarterback for the majority of the time. But they do return their top running back in Josh Jacobs, and he was a big breakout running back last season. He put up a big year, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns is what he had, along with only 1 fumble. I mean, all around, he had great stats in 2019. So I do expect him to have a big season coming up in 2020 as well. They do return their top receiver and tight end Darren Waller, and he was also another player that really came out of nowhere last season. No one really knew of Darren Waller going into 2019, but after the 2019 season, he put up 1,100 yards with 3 touchdowns and 1 fumble. So obviously, he put up a great season as well with 1,100 yards. That is really good yardage for any receiver. So I mean, yeah, Darren Waller last season definitely was a great tight end and definitely one of the best in the AFC, I would say. I mean, looking at him going into next season, many are expecting him to be a top 5 tight end in the entire league going into next season. So watch out for Darren Waller going into 2020. As far as the receiving situation goes, you return your wide receiver 1 in Tyrell Williams, and you also return your second wide receiver and Hunter Renfrow. And obviously, this will be Hunter Renfrow's second season. He came in out of Clemson, and obviously, he put up a great season. But looking at Tyrell Williams first, obviously, he put up 651 yards of receiving along with 6 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Hunter Renfrow was not far behind. He put up 605 yards with 4 touchdowns for the Raiders last season. So, I mean, the receiving core is looking very, very good for the Raiders. Obviously, Darren Waller had much more yards than Hunter Renfrow and Tyrell Williams, but still, I mean, looking at the situation here, it's looking pretty good for the Raiders next season. You also return your running back / receiver in Jalen Richard, and obviously he kind of lines up as a running back, but he managed to put up 323 yards of receiving last season. So, yeah, obviously he put up some pretty good yards for the Raiders as well. Can't forget about him. But as far as the players that they're bringing in quarterback Marcus Mariota. Of course, we already went over that. That's going to be a huge addition for Las Vegas for next season. But the linebacking core is going to be taking a huge upgrade going into next season, as they now have linebacker in Littleton, also linebacker in Nassib, and as well as another linebacker there. And so they got 3 really good running backs coming in for next season. So expect this linebacking core to be looking very good going into 2019 or going into 2020. And of course, you also bring in tight end Jason Witten out of Dallas, and that's going to be a big addition. I mean, if you look at him last season, obviously he came out of retirement to return to Dallas, and I mean, he had a pretty good season for the Cowboys in 2019, so expect him to be a possible big player for this team next season, along with Darren Waller. So the tight end situation looks great for the Raiders going into next season. I expect both Darren Waller and Jason Witten to get some sort of action going into next season. They also bring in defensive tackle Collins, also going to be a huge addition for this team. As for the players that they are losing, they lose defensive back Worley, along with defensive end Mayowa, and then another linebacker in Whitehead. So they do lose one linebacker there with Whitehead, but in the end, they do bring in 3 new ones, which, I mean, all 3 of those linebackers are very good ones and some of the best in the league. So obviously, I mean, for the Raiders next season, linebacking core looks great overall. Brings up the question, could the Raiders make the playoffs in 2020? Obviously, I mean, the Raiders are a pretty inconsistent team. I mean, they've got a good year every once in a while. I mean, I remember back a few years ago, I think it was in 2015, if I'm right. I mean, this team was 12-4, I think. They went into the playoffs looking very good. And this team was a national contender, especially going into 2019. So, I mean, obviously, it was a pretty interesting season there. But, I mean, looking at this team otherwise, I mean, this is a team that really hasn't had much success, especially in the past decade. I mean, their 12-4 season back in 2016, actually. It was in 2016 when they had that great season. I mean, that was easily their best season that they've had, at least since the 1900s. I mean, it was a huge season there for this team, and of course they didn't really make it that far. But back to 2020, I mean, I think the Raiders are a team that definitely, with now being in Las Vegas, that could give this team a boost. I mean, who knows? That could definitely give this team a boost going into next season, but obviously, I mean, that's all up for grabs right now. But then again, the Raiders division going into next season is looking pretty tough. You got Denver, you got, of course, Las Vegas as well. Can't forget about the Chargers, and then you got the Chiefs, who are reigning Super Bowl champions going into next season. So this is going to be a tough division to win going into 2020. It is not going to be an easy division to win. So obviously the Raiders, they're going to be having to go for a wild card spot more than likely. So it's going to be tough for them to be able to get to that position. But in the end, can the Raiders do it? I think there's a chance. I mean, they got some good players coming in, especially once again looking back at those linebackers. But in the end, I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. I mean, Derek Carr, I think he's a good quarterback, and many people don't give him enough credit. But in the end, I just don't think he'll be enough for the Raiders next season. But I do expect this team to get some pretty good wins down the stretch, in which now we are looking at your schedule. Of course, you start the season against the Panthers on September 13th. That is a road matchup. Then you got the Saints at home on the 21st. You got to travel to New England to play the Patriots. And then you got the Bills, Chiefs, Buccaneers, Browns, and Chargers to follow. So, I mean, this is going to be a tough schedule for the Raiders, especially that first half is looking absolutely brutal for the Raiders. You got to play the Panthers on the road. You got to play the Saints at home, Patriots, Bills, Chiefs, Buccaneers. All of those teams are going to be very tough next season. And, I mean, you can't even forget about the Browns or the Chargers either. So all 8 of those games are going to be brutal for the Raiders next season. But as far as the second half looks, it does look much easier than the first half, where you got to play the Broncos, you got the Chiefs, Falcons, and Jets both on the road, Colts, Chargers, Dolphins, and Broncos to finish off the season. So, I mean, all around, the second half of your season is much easier than the first half, but you still have a couple of really brutal games, including the Chiefs and, I mean, the Falcons on the road as well going into the second half of your schedule. But as far as what I'm expecting for this team, I think the first half of your schedule is just going to be a really tough stretch, and you're going to start the season looking terrible at 2-6. I do think you take losses against the Panthers, Saints, and Patriots. However, you get 2 pretty big wins against the Bills and the Buccaneers. I think the Raiders have a huge home field advantage this season. I think any time that the Raiders are going to be at home, this team is going to play very well. So they'll play the Saints pretty close, I think, but they'll also get 2 big wins against the Bills and the Buccaneers. However, you're going to go winless on the road, especially in your first half of your season against the Panthers, Patriots, Chiefs, Browns, and Chargers. So you'll be 2-6 going into the rest of your November, which I think the second half of your schedule, once again, is much easier. And I do think you have a much more promising end to your season, as you will finish off the year at 5-3, or that's what your second half of your season record is going to be. You'll beat off the Broncos on November 15th. You'll lose to the Chiefs and the Falcons to finish off your November. Then in your December, you're going to go undefeated. You're going to beat off the Jets, Colts, Chargers, and Dolphins. in 4 straight weeks, and then you'll lose to the Broncos to finish off the season on January 3rd. So your record prediction for next year, 7-9, is what we're looking at right now, which honestly, I mean, it's the same thing as 2019, but in the end, I mean, 7-9 in comparison to how this program has been in the past is really not all that terrible. I mean, of course, I mean, it's been tough for them to even get above 6 wins, and so I think a 7-9 record is probably the most realistic thing to come for this team in 2020. And obviously with John Gruden in there, I mean, this is a team that I think, I mean, they've got the potential to make it possibly to the playoffs. Who knows? But I think in the end, this is a team that doesn't do it this season. But look out for 2021. This is a team that's in the rebuilding phase, and they certainly are improving right now. So, I mean, this team is definitely promising as we look forward into the future. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Raiders. Let me know whether you disagree with anything here or not. Oh yeah, then again, thanks again for watching. Thanks again for all your support. If you like this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.